Hi everyone, so you might have seen this recent development with the 1 Inna Monk, where you use Tempest Rush to apply Cyclone Strikes and the bindings of the gods and get a lot of Zodiac procs, which overall makes the setup a few tiers better than before. I would estimate it's like something of a 3-tier boost to what we have known before from the typical like stand and punch setups that we have from Inna, and it definitely is working really well. I've cleared a GR140 with this already at 3.5k paragons, so this is definitely really strong and looks like it can very slightly beat the Wave of Light LED Monk. So pretty cool stuff, and I don't believe it's gonna survive season 24 with the loss of the ethereals, because we will go back to Shenlongs and the typical non-season setup, so play it while you can. Now in this video I want to talk about the different setups that I have tried with this. Now there's not really a lot of flexibility in this whole setup, because you need to have Focus and Restraint, you need to have 1 you need to have Flying Dragon, you need to have the Cruder's Boots, you need to have the bindings. So that doesn't really leave us with a lot of moving pieces. It's the weapon cube and it is 1 legendary gem. It's trapped, and this should be Enforcer, and then you have either Taeguk or Stricker. And you also have 2 different shoulder options, the Mantle of Channeling and the Lefebvre's Solidoki. So this one gives you some offensive value, while Lefebvre gives you more defensive value, and that's the only difference between them. Now let's talk about the shoulders first. I use this Mantle of Channeling over those Lefebvre's shoulders here, and the main reason why the setup is getting an advantage out of this whole Tempest rushing around is because of Mantle of Channeling and the 25% damage bonus. So there are also some other perks, and the setup is still slightly better, but not really by much, if you give up the Mantle of Channeling damage buff. That buff is almost a 1.5 tier bonus out of the 3 tiers or so that I have mentioned at the start. So you basically lose half of your benefit from even playing the setup if you give up the Mantle of Channeling. You should definitely try to survive with Mantle of Channeling and instead take some of the defensive passives that the Monk has to offer. There are a lot of really strong defensive passives. There is the Guardian's Path, which gives you 35% dodge. There is Harmony, that can be really nice. There is Resolve, there is Sixth Sense. All these defensive passives are actually quite powerful on the Monk, and I would use those before I give up the shoulders. Now for the weapon and the gem combo. So this build is overall very good at finishing the boss, even without the Banish Stricken. So the main combo that people use is Taeguk instead of Stricken, and also a Furnace, which gives you 50% elite damage. So this helps you to just blast down elites in the run as well, and it also helps you with the boss. And if you want to go without Stricken, I would recommend exactly this setup, because else you're gonna be struggling on the higher tiers. If you're doing a bit more casual pushing, so anything below 140 or so, I'd say, you can definitely get away without Furnace and even like no Stricken, and you're gonna be fine. But if you go really high towards the cap of your character, then eventually the boss fights will be around 3 minutes at least, even if you keep your squirts up almost the entire time. So if you have a boss where you drop your squirt sometimes, or when you spawn adds and your Mystic allies sometimes hit those adds and don't really explode on the boss fights can take even longer, and in that case going out Stricken is really bad. Now the setup that I had been using for most of my pushing was Echoing Fury plus Stricken. So my idea was to get Echoing Fury proc sometimes when I start killing some enemies, and that will help me proc my Flying Dragon, which it then puts me at a 5 attacks per second cap. Echoing Fury alone is not good enough, and is definitely inferior to Flying Dragon because you have to proc it from kills, and it also has a lower attack speed value. You can see 75% additive attack speed, while Flying Dragon gives you 100% multiplicative attack speed. So Flying Dragon is much more powerful, but with Echoing Fury I had a bit of a damage buff while not having Flying Dragon, so to say. And I also got a few more Bartok stacks, I got a few more Stricken stacks, so I figured that would help me, and it was not really that bad. But I think that eventually, once I started experimenting more with the other setups, I was better off without this Echoing Fury. That being said, again, if you go to a tier where you don't really push to the absolute maximum like I did with the GR140 push, if you're, let's say, Paragon 2k or 1500 and you push like 140, you're gonna be way below the cap of your character. And then Echoing Fury is actually really good value, because you always get this whenever you pop your Mystic Allies in a decent pull, depending on the monster type a little bit and what you're fighting. But the point is that you get a lot easier Echoing Fury procs, which means a lot more value out of this weapon, so that you have almost constant 5 stacks whenever you have some kind of decent pull, and you get quite some value out of it. For the extreme pushing where stuff lives really long, I wouldn't recommend Echoing Fury now, but if you go a bit lower, then definitely it could be a pretty nice option. But you usually want to pair this with the Fury Stricken just to make sure you have a fast boss kill and you can finish off some of these pretty quickly. And lastly, I want to show you the setup that I have used for my own 150 clear, and that works really well as well, which is the Executioner plus Fury Stricken combo. So here the idea is that you get Oculus rings, which usually you don't spawn very much, because this is a pet build. Kills don't count for Oculus procs from your follower, but Executioner allows you to get those Oculus procs when you Tempest Rush through low HP enemies. So you see them quite often, and you can go into the Oculus ring and get the 85% multiplicative damage bonus for a good chunk of the time at least. You can't always use them, but you can definitely use them, I don't know, every second time at least, I would say. So the average benefit is still something like 30-40% DPS, and that is quite massive. That is essentially the same value that you get from Taeguk in a scenario with some assimilation stacks. So the thought here was that I gained back most of the loss from the Taeguk, or even more in some cases, and I still have a really fast boss kill from the Fury Stricken. Fury Stricken essentially guarantees a sub 1 minute boss kill, even all the way to 150, and without Fury Stricken it would be 2-3 minutes longer, especially with the Executioner setup instead of the Furnace. For me, that setup seemed to work really well, but you have to consider that you are on a squishy build, and going into an Oculus ring is not always an option. When there's some elites, when there's elite affixes inside, and you might not have the opportunity to press Serenity and things like that, you're gonna be struggling, and sometimes it just spawns in the wrong place, so you don't really want to move the entire pull along. Sometimes you go towards the Oculus ring while waiting for your Mystic Allies to explode, but they just go and run around and don't really hit anything. So there is stuff like this happening, but the overall benefit of the Executioner is definitely not negligible. And on top of that, you actually cull enemies at 10% life with this weapon, which is actually quite helpful in some cases. So you kill the trash much faster, you gain back a lot of the lost value from the Furnace on the elite fights as well, because of the Oculus rings combined with this, and your counter pilots are much better as well. So I've heard about the idea of going Executioner plus Taeguk, and if you go for like a rather low tier, or if you want to fish for a really good boss where you can potentially get Oculus rings, then this might be a good idea. Or when you're like super overkilling and you're just like 6k Paragon and you blast through 150s anyway, then you will have massive damage with Oculus rings plus Taeguk combined. But for the most part, I would recommend really high end push, Executioner plus Stricken. If you don't go super crazy on the push, I would go to a standard Furnace plus Taeguk setup. And this is the two things I would recommend. That's also it for these different setups, so I hope that this helps you. I have been experimenting with some really weird stuff, but the weapon options are a few, and all of them are kind of something, but not really anything. So I have tried some weird stuff like getting in dash and Crystal Fist, and I had tried something like Messerschmitt, but you don't really get much value out of it. I've even tried Vigilance to try to proc some Inner Sanctuary. This weapon is terrible. I saw like 1 proc in 3 minutes. Even tried a Burning Axe of Sankers equipped so that we get some of those Ignore Pain procs, but that also didn't really help us. So overall we have basically these 3 options: Furnace, Executioner and Echoing Fury. I would recommend the 2 latter ones here, but Echoing Fury, especially if you don't go like crazy high, can definitely be a good option. So I hope this helps you for your own pushes. Have a lot of fun with the Innas. I had definitely a great time with the 150 push, and hope you liked this video. See you guys next time.